pound block, 500-pound block, maybe even 1,000-pound block. Even like 3 or 4 tons pound blocks. That would start becoming a problem with our current technology, especially in the sand. And especially if you got to stack them. Okay? But the ancient Egyptian or whoever 10,000 years ago built this didn't remove 100-pound block. They removed 200 tons block. And we know that they were removed from the enclosure because the stratification of the layers of rock matches where they were removed from, and you can actually tell which rock came from exactly where in the enclosure. 200 tons. See, this is a little person here. See what I mean? It's not trivial. You don't just grab a 200-ton block with your buddies and move it over there. The current we actually at this time lift about 200 tons with the largest land crane on earth. And we move it only from a truck bed into a boat. We can't roll with it. We can't go and like move it around the sand, and certainly we can't stack them on top of each other to make a temple. 10,000 years ago, somebody was moving 200-ton block with ease. I think this is fantastic. You know, because this is about our true history. This is about what happened on this planet prior to our current history, prior to our current thinking. Look at this statue. Ramses II. When they found this statue, it was laying like this. It had fallen over in the desert. It's made out of pink granite. It's perfectly polished with copper tools. And this is a person beside it. The statue itself, when they found it, they said, "Oh, let's just move it over there because we're going to build the Ramses Museum." So the engineers came and they said, "Well, okay, but then we'll have to cut it in pieces because this thing is approximately 1,000-ton solid block of granite. 1,000 ton. That is 5 times more than what we can lift today with a land crane." So instead they built a museum around it. It was much easier. This is not the only 1,000-ton block that was found. The pillars on each side of the entrance of temples in Egypt, they are called obelisks. Many of them were in excess of 1,000 tons. And they all come out, all these large objects come out of a quarry that we know where it is. It's hundreds of miles up the Nile. And the quarry is on the other side of the Nile over a mountain range. Okay? When you ask archaeologists, how did this get there? They say, they cut a trench from the Nile across the mountain range into the quarry. And then they let the water in, and then they picked up the object, they stuck it on a barge, and they floated it down the Nile. But there's no evidence of that trench ever being cut. How do you lift up a 1,000-ton object and put it on a barge without sinking it? I mean, that is just not appropriate. It just doesn't happen. So when you look at this, you start to wonder, who were these sun gods? And were they able to go all around the world? Under the water in Japan, recently, pyramids were found. These pyramids are at 19.47 latitude. They're enormous pyramids. All the fishermen knew that they were there, but they didn't think it was important, so they didn't tell anybody. And here is another picture of these slabs. They're huge. They're huge blocks. What's really interesting about those is that, you see, you can't date a pyramid. You can't date a monument because carbon dating only carbon dates. You need carbon. Rock doesn't have much carbon in it. Not enough to date it. It has silica, and it has, it has a certain rate of decay and all this. You can date how old is the rock, but that won't tell you when it was cut and assembled into a pyramid. Okay? So actually, archaeologists don't date the monuments. They just find the bones of this poor fellow beside it, or they find a fireplace beside it or something, and then they carbon date that. And they say, oh, it's this dude that built this thing. You see? But when the pyramid goes under the water, now coral growth starts to happen shortly after. And that's carbon datable. So now you can tell at least when the pyramid went under the water. Well, when they carbon dated these pyramids, they went under the water at least 10,000 years ago. The meltdown of the last ice age, when the water rose and covered the earth. There is over 500 flood stories in ancient civilization all around the world, talking about an advanced civilization that was there prior the sun gods, and the flooding that occurred that destroyed most of that civilization. Here we might be seeing some of the vestiges of that civilization. Go ahead.
Well, Edgar Casey came up
with by finding a wall or a road. And we did, and he said it was going to be in the early 70s, and in 1973, I believe, divers off the coast of Bimini found huge rocks under the water, making a road. And Edgar Casey said we were going to find a chamber under the paws of the Sphinx. And recently, using
Side-looking radar?
yeah, I'm sorry.
Side-looking radar?
Yeah, it's actually seismic